having said that, there are obviously some challenges when we talk about a program this big and being in the middle, stuck in the middle, so to speak, between the administration, the Japanese administration, and the foreign staff. So here are some of them. Balancing program goals and objectives in the context of imposed administrative constraints. And I'm going to give you some examples of things that have happened in my tenure, which is only in its second year, but to kind of illustrate how these things can be negotiated and hopefully go away with some ideas when we all face these kind of challenges of how to best mediate it, or options, as it were. For example, in 2010, we switched to the TOEIC ITP, replaced the TOEFL ITP. This may be happening at some of your institutions. And there was a big problem. The way that we had our students' courses leveled was based, even though we adjusted the scores according to what ETS says is equivalent, we noticed a huge amount of students in one particular level that we didn't have enough courses to accommodate. We didn't have enough teachers to accommodate the students at one particular level. And this was in April, and obviously when these numbers came out, I was shocked and dismayed and realizing that we didn't have enough people to cover the number of students we had. So I went to academic affairs and I said, we've got to come up with a solution to this. And I said, well, my suggestion is that we adjust the TOEIC scores and basically tell students who are, move them up basically, and tell students who are below this that they have a choice. They can either go to this level class or this level class. And rather than demanding that the students make that move, it was kind of hard after the fact. We couldn't really do that, so at least we provided the option that a student could take a lower level course had their TOEIC been at this particular score. So what I'm trying to illustrate is the fact that these things can be negotiated if you know the proper people to talk to, the proper channels to go through as far as the Japanese administration. So that's one example. The Japanese medium courses, this is something that was incorporated into the WLC 2 years ago. And this is a compromise to provide means by which students can obtain foreign language credits needed for graduation. We have a student population, shall we say, who, for better or for worse, have a tendency to want to take courses to get their credits and don't really excel, shall we say, in English. So I think this was also a compromise in between the WLC and what we would like to have happen and the administrative needs of the institution of moving students towards graduation. So these are some compromises that have taken place recently. The next topic, initiating changes of backdrop of embedded democracy, I should say, bureaucracy. Let's get it straight. The registration process has been a bit of a conundrum, and the way that it works now, there's a pre-selection system. Students can select up to 5 courses, and it seems quite at random. So what happens on the first day of classes, the teacher gets a list of students, and the students don't show up, or there are 25 students on the list and only 5 show up. And yet there are 25 students in the class, 30 students in the class, so it doesn't seem to work. So I basically propose that we can this system and that we initiate something else, and I'm still working on that. Hopefully by next year, for those of you who work at Soka University, hopefully we'll have a different system in place. But again, it's something that I took to the administrative committee meeting for the general education committee and proposed in Japanese that this needed to be changed. There were too many problems, too much ambiguity. So another way to sort of negotiate the barriers that exist. And this one is channeling concerns of proper administrative division. Being in the situation, you often get stuck in the middle and hear issues arising from the foreign staff and vice versa. So how do you mediate that? One, for example, the course cancellation policy. I will send out an email and say, you need to contact this person in academic affairs in order to make sure that your course is canceled if you can't make it. And I still receive emails from teachers in 8:30 in the morning, and when I get into work, I can't come today, please, I had to cancel my class. And obviously, I can do something about it, but usually it's too late. So my advice is to contact the administrative affairs directly. But sometimes that isn't clear. So that's one particular challenge that happens. University-wide general announcements, these can often be in Japanese, although I think the institution has gotten better about making these in English. If it's something that we had a disaster preparedness drill scheduled for last Friday, it was ultimately canceled. But I had to make sure that the teachers knew that this was going to happen and how to prepare for it. Even though the university did a very good job, actually, I was quite pleased of putting the information out in English. There were some things that were unclear. So I feel like it's my position to clarify those particular administrative issues with the faculty. Follow-up emails. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact Lank in Administrative Affairs. It certainly sounds like a push-off, but if I'm trying to explain something that Administrative Affairs is initiating, a policy change, and the questions come to me, I can't answer the questions. I don't really have the knowledge. So I think that in a position in the middle management, you have to be able to say, well, you need to take this question to the proper people, and I can mediate for you if necessary, but you need to direct the question to the proper place. Okay. Two of the things that I'd like to talk about, just to conclude here, the implications, communicative distance. I think this has been the theme of the previous discussion as well, is that there are obviously going to be communication and cultural distance between foreign faculty and Japanese administration. But I would suggest that it can be mediated through direct contact with concerned parties, and this really depends on having language competency so that it's necessary for Japanese proficiency of foreign faculty is necessary. Not all, but certainly a certain amount, and survival of Japanese is very useful when you're dealing with some of the departments on campus. But it also goes the other way with English proficiency in the Japanese administration, that at least each department should have one Japanese administrator who is English proficient. And I think our institution has done a good job of this recently, making sure that this is happening, so that any kind of logistical problem that's happening with class cancellations, anything like that, can be mediated between the teacher and the proper administrator rather than me being the conduit for it. Because having a triangle obviously causes the potential for miscommunication to exacerbate. And finally, the cultural precedents. I think we talk about this a lot in the way that we analyze and evaluate Japanese institutions is there an institutional hierarchy. And so how do you go around that? Well, going through the proper channels. If you have a particular problem, knowing who has influence, and this is something that came out in the previous conversation, that if you have a particular issue and you can't seem to figure out how to solve it, that you go to someone that you know who has influence and that can talk to the proper people, and that you can overcome the obstacle that you face with. The appropriate management structure, I think that the previous graphic that I showed you of how the management structure is organized to handle this many students and this many faculty is useful. It's imperative, I think, and you have to have that in place. And it's not foolproof, obviously there are glitches, but having that in place certainly makes life easier. And communicative models, I find this very different, very based on cultural expectations. I think that the way that I would communicate with the Japanese staff and the foreign faculty is very different. And I don't know if I'm conscious of it, but certainly when I switch to Japanese, I think my code switching happens sort of without me being aware of it, so that when I'm communicating with the Japanese administration, I'm using a different set of communicative models that I would not use probably with foreign faculty. And finally, going back to these advantages and disadvantages, just reviewing in conclusion, the advantages, the information sharing and group commitment to decisions, and disadvantages, reduction of individual control, instability of authority, and situational turbulence. So within this structure, and I think the model which says that it's really not one or the other, that it sort of centralized control and participatory management work in coordination, and that there's a continuum sort of happening, and that your stance may change somewhat depending on the particular issue and the feedback that you're getting. But I think as the assistant director in my position, you have to know when to intervene, where should I place myself? When do I make decisions that will reduce the control or reduce the influence of particular people? Unfortunately, at times that may be necessary to try to manage the organization. So anyhow, I think I'm doing okay. Hopefully we have some time for questions, but I see at least my iPod says I'm out of time. So thank you very much.